This is Greg Canty here, and welcome to the Win Happy podcast. Stay tuned for interesting chats with interesting people about winning their lives and being happy at the same time. This show has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with future careers and workplace expert John Fitzgerald, the founder of Harmonics. John, the author of Future Proof Your Career from the Inside Out, and the host of the Chord podcast, talks about his life and career as well as all things work. We spend huge chunks of our lives at work, so we owe it to ourselves to get the most from this precious time. Let's hear from John. John Fitzgerald, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks a million, Greg. Delighted to join you.
So tell me, what problem were you solving today?
What problem was I solving today? I was recording Energizer, which is a new program we've developed. And my problem was all about helping people to become future ready for the future of work and giving them the confidence to thrive, giving them more self-awareness and helping them see what's changing and where they might fit.
For God's sake, all this change business, John, sure, isn't everything staying the same?
It's not indeed. Our lives are full of change, Greg, and from where you came from or I came from, it's the same individual, but encountering many different changes along the way.
Yeah, and on the subject of change and where we came from, if you might play along with me a little bit, I want to hit the big rewind button. So I know you're the founder of Harmonics. You've been there for more than a day or two. 17 years in, I believe.
2006.
Yeah. So in terms of that rewind, a question I ask everyone is, who the hell are you and where did you come from?
I came from a Crossroads in rural County Limerick, looking across at Bruff Rugby Club from our house. And it's funny now, the first question you asked me was all about helping people at a career crossroads. And I grew up at a crossroads. And I think our environment shapes who we are. So the environment in which I grew up in was a rural farm house. The door was always open. There was a smell of apple tarts or scones or brown bread in the kitchen or bacon and cabbage, depending on the time of day. And my mother was a very sociable person and great to the community. And people would stream in and out of there every hour of the day. They might be coming from the creamery. There might be some lonely bachelors who might need to get fed in the middle of the day, and the bacon and cabbage might be there in the bottom oven when you come home from school, or some days the bacon mightn't be there because too many people call for the dinner. So it was a very social place, and I think a lot of that environment where I grew up gave me a great sense of community where I was from, great connection to the parish, and they were always out doing something, mum and dad, and to help the parish. And that kind of formed my values and who I am as a person.
Could I call that an entrepreneurial family? Because I know farming is a way of life, but effectively it was self-employment, wasn't it?
It was indeed. And because I do career coaching today, again, going back to my childhood, my dad never wanted to be a farmer. He had three sisters older than him, and he was the son, the youngest. But his parents died when he was in the space of a year, when he was 19, and he came home to take over the farm. And he never wanted to be a dairy farmer, and he hated milking the cows morning and evening and feeling tied to this thing. And as I grew up, Mam actually was reared in County Roscommon, and he met her in Dublin, and she came down to this place, you can imagine, and today would have been their wedding anniversary if they were still alive. They'd have been 58 years married. And coming down to this house in the middle of nowhere, not knowing anybody and settling in the community must have been huge change back in the mid-60s. You know, she was a great woman to keep things going. And I remember her telling me stories about facing the bank manager and they not having enough, and the fear of the bank manager at that time, and interest rates being very high. So we never grew up in this kind of an environment where there was huge amounts of money or anything like that. You were kind of going from milk check to milk check, and then there was nothing for the winter. So it was definitely, as you say, entrepreneurial. Being a farmer's son, as my mother used to say, the devil gives work to idle hands. So there was this sense of you always had to be doing something or inventing something if something was broken. So, sure, look, it was a very interesting time in Ireland as well. Lots of change going on, and you were seeing all of that change happening in front of your eyes, how farming was changing. And just being an interested spectator, I suppose, and observing people in the community as well who'd be passing, going to the shop and the different habits. So there was almost a degree in psychology there as well.
Did he ever come to actually enjoy farming? Did that day ever happen?
He didn't really. I mean, he loved. I think if he had his time all over again, he would have been a great engineer. He was very good at maths. He loved writing. He gave me a great love of writing. He wrote an A4 diary, and part of his legacy is he's left me with all of these A4 diaries going back for years and years and years, accounting what went on every day of his life. And he also wrote the parish notes for the Limerick leaders. So he was a keen observer and had a huge interest in the GA and sport, and wanted to make sure that everybody got a call out and was recognised. So he got opportunities maybe to do a bit of building and stuff like that around the farm and make it better. But, never got that, I guess, sense of, is he really happy doing what he's doing?
Did you get a sense of that yourself growing up with him, that this is something Dad never wanted to do?
Oh, absolutely. And he wouldn't have been shy in talking about that. And in fairness to him, again, farmers' sons were expected to stay in the farm. And I made the wrong decision after school in that I did stay in the farm for a short period of time because Mam became the referee in the house because, Dad had a way of doing things and here was I. And, he said that the farm, you should never do it because of legacy or history or say, well, this is your inheritance and someday it'll be yours kind of thing. But he was always pushing me to do something different or make the best of myself. Not very great conversations around that, but I could get the sense that what would you be doing hanging around here kind of thing. And eventually, my mother helped me to get my first job, but my dad's not making me feel guilty. And even some people from the parish would kind of make you feel guilty to say, my God, you're not going to take over the land. You're heading off and trying new jobs and stuff like that. It's amazing how rural people think, and they think in established ways rather than maybe adapting for what's required for the future.
So like you were breaking the rules by vamoosing.
Yeah. Breaking the rules, exactly. And my mother used her networking skills. She was from Roscommon, but she had one cousin living in Limerick and he was working in Rocha Stores, and she rang him and she said, was there any opportunity that John could get a start there? And off I went into Rocha Stores for an interview for the men's department, and it turned out to be a man called Mr. Crowley, and he was from Cork, actually, rural Cork, and he was into the GA and he was from a farm, and we didn't talk much about men's suits, but I got the job and got the start in Rocha Stores, men's outfitters, which again was, I was at the Crossroads of Limerick. My life was all about Crossroads. I was looking out onto the main street, O'Connell Street, and from the men's department, and meeting all of these brilliant characters from the city. Again, culturally, I hadn't grown up in the city and known many people from there, so you met every sort of a generation, and listening to their stories and becoming interested in them, and realising that if you provided a great customer service, they'd come back next week and have a chat with you and maybe buy more,
Rocha Stores was a different type of retailer, wasn't it? I even remember going back in the day, even if you got a voucher and you didn't want the voucher, they'd cash it in for you.
It was one of those great things at Christmas time that if you bought something in Roaches, you could come back with your receipt and get your money back, and it was one of those great things, or return it for something else. So that was their USP, definitely. they were a real old-fashioned, great values sense of a place of where you worked. And I didn't realize it at the time, because I remember looking out the window and I'd missed my chance to go to college. And I was looking out at all of my friends who were now going to UL or LIT and thinking, God, I'm here and I'm not getting a qualification. But I was actually getting a brilliant life experience in how to communicate and interact with people, which I didn't value at the time, but it became invaluable later in life.
Yeah, because I did the usual sneaky peep at LinkedIn, which pretty much captures everything that you've done along the way. And in my notes here, John, I kind of summed it up as the university of life, now that you've said that, because you did bounce from one role to another. And I know there was a bit of emigration in there as well to a little degree. And all of those different roles and all of those different places, what did it teach you?
I was asked, I was on a coaching course a number of years ago, and we were all asked to bring a symbol of our life's journey to the course. And of course, I was there the night before and had no symbol. I was in Dublin and I said, oh my God, what is it? What is it about my life journey? And I found a poem called The Road Less Travelled. And I believe my journey was my road less travelled. It's a short poem that I kind of converted for myself, and it was all about two roads diverged for me all my life, and I'm not sorry I couldn't travel both. But the whole idea was that if there was a road towards permanence or security, I went the other way. I went with my gut and my instinct rather than earning more. So there's kind of three particular times in my life where I made choices in my career which were all huge drops in salary, to either take a risk, do something different, and follow my heart and my passion. And that really stood me well over the longer period. I didn't think twice about it at the time. I went with gut, I went with instinct. That's how I describe my journey.
Yeah, because I could see there was the farming, there was the apprentice draper in Roja Stores. Then there was a trek out to the United States. We had Aer Lingus. You were selling hygiene products, health and safety. And if you wrapped all that up as being kind of like a sales consultant or sales consultancy, that university of life part, learning about people. And this love of coaching, did you have a role in some of those organizations whereby you were training salespeople, or how did the coaching creep into you?
Yeah, so that happened when I went to the States and came back and worked in Aer Lingus, and then I got jobs in sales. Again, I remember leaving my job in Aer Lingus in Heathrow, Crossroads of the world, and coming back to Ireland, taking a huge salary cut and going out on the road in van sales. And then, I became successful in that field, and then I was headhunted to a number of different companies. But the time came then where I was becoming the person who was training in the salespeople, and I had that track record of being, I suppose, any new person that started, I was bringing them on board and teaching them how to sell. And then I was approached to come into a coaching business as a minority partner, and I left, and it didn't make sense at the time because I was at a company car, I'd loads of money, top salesperson in Ireland, and coming to a second-hand car and an average industrial wage, and to start up in this startup venture. And what I learned from that was I was highly successful selling a tangible product. Now I had to go and sell an intangible product. It's much easier to go and talk to a pharmaceutical company about, gowns that they would use in a clean room, and there's a specific purpose, to moving to a company and saying, we've got 8 people in our sales team and we want to develop them. So you're selling a promise that you can help change people. And that's a high trust, high value sale, because they're making an investment in you as a person to know that you're going to deliver on your promise. And when you're young and inexperienced in that phase, when I went into that industry, the first 2.5, 3 years were absolutely dreadful. and huge amount of learning, not winning customers, losing faith in yourself. You went from being this really successful person in one industry to being an absolute disaster in another. And it took an awful lot of learning and reading of new content. And I'd gone back to college in UL and studied there as well. But for me, the development was making that change from tangible to intangible.
How did you coach yourself out from that bottom? Because I know when things go wrong, and that can happen any day.
Yeah.
You know, those cycles of confidence can kick you really, really quickly. And you can be top of the class, winning accounts left, right, and center. And you get a small little run where things don't go your way and you're feeling useless beyond belief. You start questioning yourself. But if you get an extended run like that where nothing is working, a straight question for you, why didn't you throw in the towel?
I was very close to throwing in the towel, to be quite honest with you. And it was weird again how the world works, because when I was at that space and I was actually talking to another company about saying, would I come on as a salesperson for them? And then weirdly, it's like we set the potatoes and they started to grow. So 3 huge clients happened to say yes in the space of a month, which was the best thing that ever happened, because then that started a whole journey of a great winning streak, I guess, and building my reputation in the field, which I just needed that first number of clients to get on board. And that all went on until 2006. And then it was I knew that I wasn't happy where I was. And a colleague of mine walked into the office one day and she said, "Where's the real John gone?" And I said, "Geez, I must be showing up an awful lot more cheesed off than I think I'm portraying." And I wasn't happy. And, I decided to leave that business, and I was very unprepared and I made an absolute hames of it, and it didn't go well when I left. And I tried to set up and I couldn't set up, and I ended up on the dole at 40. And we were at the height of the economic boom in Ireland in 2006. And anybody who wanted a job in Ireland had a job then.
Except for John.
Except for me and the rest of the people who didn't want a job, going in on a weekly basis into the dole office. And, back to growing up on a farm, you'd never expect for one day, that here you were going to be, signing on the dole. And that was there was shame as an emotion. There was fear. You had, I was a wife at home who wasn't earning money and minding our 3-year-old daughter. And I can remember jumping on the trampoline at home with my daughter Sarah, and she was jumping up and down, and she was having the time of her life because Dad was at home all the time, and my head was like the trampoline, jumping up and down. I just was all over the shop. I didn't have enough money then, for mortgage and stuff like that. So I brazened it out and went down to my dad. And we used to go down on my daughter and myself on a Saturday, and we'd get a bit of bacon and cabbage. And my mother would always think I wasn't fed every week until I got the bacon and cabbage on a Saturday. But I went out with my dad in the yard and we were chatting away, and, I was kind of explaining what was going on. I never asked my dad for money or anything like that. And I said, Dad, things are not great. And if there was any chance of a loan, to be great. And he said, "You got yourself into this, get yourself out of it, John." And it was the best life and career advice I could have ever got at the time, because, geez, I drove out of that yard and I was fit to kill him. And he wasn't mean, but he was testing me out and challenging me. And it lit a fire in my belly. And I said, I found something that I don't think I ever had in my life, was that huge competitive streak to kind of say, I'm not going to end here. I'm going to drive on. I'm going to rise again. And that's what happened. And that happened. I had two very good coaching friends who were enormously supportive at that time and probably did an awful lot of listening to my bail booked and my poor story. And it's amazing when you're going through a period like that in your life, you begin to talk about stuff and you get buried in your own story. And then it's mad as Irish people, if I tell a bad story, it's like you're in competition with me, then you have to tell me about the cancer or whatever else that might have been going on. So you begin to attract all these bad stories into your life.
Lovely.
and you get all this collection and you said, geez, I've gone for 40 years of my life and I've never heard as many bad luck stories in all my life. But sure, I'm giving that out to the universe and they're firing it back at me. But it was interesting. One person at that time had asked to work with me as a coach. And I said, look, at the moment, I'm not trading. I'm not able to do anything. And he said, would you just meet me for a cup of coffee anyway and we can have a chat? And I did. And we had a conversation. And of course, I went into my bail booked and my story and whatever. And he said, I've heard about you. I've heard a lot about you. And look, I know it's not the right time right now, but maybe we can meet again. So we had another coffee 2 weeks later. And it was out in Shannon Town Centre. And he chatted away to me and he said, look, I know, John, that when this is over, you're going to be very successful at what you set out to do. And then he said, I need to go. And he put a brown envelope in my hand and he walked out and he said, don't open that until you get home. So I was just there, what's after happening here? I went up to the I think there was 2 or 3 floors in that town centre car park. And I went into the car and I felt like, Jesus, is someone going to watch me opening a brown envelope here? I'd never gotten a brown envelope in my life. And I opened it and there was 3,000 euros worth of 50 euro notes in it. And I rang him and I said, what are you after doing here? And he said, look, that's my investment in your future. I know that you're going to make it and you'll give me that back in time. And like those 2 different messages, one from my father and this man who didn't know me from Adam and hugely charitable to me, gave me a message that, by God, John, you there's somebody seeing stuff in you that you're not seeing in yourself.
And if your dad had given you that same envelope, what would have been different?
I think I'd have been full of guilt that I had taken money from him. And I think what it gave me was a sense of I could do it without having to get a handout. And it was more me claiming my independence and my ability to do it on my own and have a go rather than Daddy helped him out.
When were you able to give it back to him?
I gave it back to him. I felt very guilty actually, and with that money, I think I might have used 500 of it at one stage, but I think I gave it back to him about 3 months later. But it was a very short period of time that I had it.
It was a gesture as much as the money, wasn't it?
Absolutely, it was a gesture. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
What a thing to do. You must have known this man quite well, did you?
No, I didn't. He was recommended by another coach to me. Yeah, I mean, I had met this person for the first time kind of 2 weeks before that. And then I met him a second time. So it was such a weird, meeting and such a, it was definitely, it set me back, obviously, because if it was a very good friend of mine that gave me the money, great, but it wasn't,
You weren't asked to murder someone in the morning or anything like that. Not to get a bit too woo-woo about it. It sounded like an angel was sent down from somewhere at exactly the right moment to change things for you.
Yeah, and I think even starting out then, because I had to start out with trading with companies who I'd never traded with before. So when I did eventually start up Harmonics in September 2006, I wasn't allowed to trade with anybody I'd traded with before. So I had a blank slate. And it was lucky that one woman who'd worked in another company had gone to work in the University of Limerick, who had never traded with before. And she got my details and asked me, would I design a pilot program for career development for women? It was Chuck Feeney Atlantic Philanthropy money at the time. And that program I did a proposal, did a pilot with 12 women. And I think it was 5 work days, like between workshop and coaching days we were doing at that time. And it became such a success that every woman in University of Limerick who was working there wanted to be on this program, and it gave us 15 months of recurring revenue, which was an absolutely brilliant start for us at the time. And again, maybe that was another sign that I was meant to do something. And my first 3 clients were, UL, O2 and Specsavers, and it was a fantastic first 3 clients to get on board, all because of relationships that I built with people in other companies, and they'd gone out on a limb to give me a start,
That must have been one of the first female leadership programs in the country at the time. Would it have been, or am I overstating it?
It was career development rather than leadership development.
Okay.
So it was definitely new in relation to what we were trying to do from a career development perspective, because it was the first time I think that these women had ever got one-to-one coaching or got a time out to think about themselves and what they wanted from their career.
So Harmonics really started around that idea, did it?
Yes, it was, the ambition was to be the best career coaching company in Ireland. That was the ambition. And I wanted to set it up with really strong values. People who we work with will be great clients, and we will, we would bring people on board, pay them well, and make sure that they stayed with us. And I always mention values at the start when I'm talking to clients, and it's so important to me around what you stand for. And it's a thing we all see in walls, but it's how you live it and how you breathe it. And once you start in our business, which is similar to yourself, Greg, it's very relationship based. It's a high value, high trust sale, and your name is everything. And if you don't have that, then you're gone,
What are your values?
My values that are really important to me are things like honesty and integrity, learning, making a difference. I suppose they're the drivers for me in what's important, is this sense of being yourself, idea generation, innovation. But that sense of being okay with who you are as a person is so important. And that person that grew up in a Crossroads, depending on whatever day of the week, some people would start here and say, oh, geez, he's the MD of the business now. You have to talk to him in a different way. One of the things I got from my Crossroads was, it doesn't matter who I'm talking to, I'm having a conversation and I'm being myself rather than, I hear this thing about executive presence when people come to us for coaching and they have to be like this in the boardroom. But I've never felt I had to be like anybody else to succeed in life. You just have to be yourself. And people need to be reminded of that all the time, is that if they can be true to themselves, well then everything else will come from that and radiate out, rather than feeling I have to put on this suit and look this way. I suppose we're growing up in a world now where we have the influencer generation, we have Instagram, we have the perfect pose and photograph, and we're seeing people that are a lot more insecure in themselves rather than feeling like themselves and being okay with that.
Can you talk to me about the evolution of Harmonics from that first program in 2006 to where we are today?
We grew into different divisions, and it was more opportunities that I saw. I would see myself as innovative and spotting opportunities and being able to build relationships. And in 2008, we set up a recruitment division, and Melissa came in and started that. In 2009, the recession had kicked in, and I was asked to do a television program with RTE in Cork. Actually produced it, and it was about rising after redundancy and working with 6 people I hadn't ever met before, and it was on a Sunday night for 6 weeks. And again, that was a huge risk. People said, my God, you're mad. You're meeting these 6 people. You don't know what's going to happen at the end. And I never saw fear. I just saw I can help these people naively. But it was a great success, and I was very happy with how it turned out. And then people were losing their jobs at that time. The likes of Dell had big closure in Limerick, and lots of companies downsizing. So it was a really challenging time, and that helped me then to set up Harmonics Financial, and Liam Crowe came on board, and that was around personal financial planning. So that was an evolution of what we did to support people from a career perspective. And then I got burnt out then. Because I was trying to do everything. And of course, I wasn't a very good general manager in trying to run the business. And that's when we won a project with GSK in Cork. And for the first time, I could kind of see 6 months down the road in relation to income that might be coming in. And someone I had coached in the past, Fiachra Driscoll, had left Beamish, and he contacted me and said he was interested in doing some work, and did some work with us as a contractor initially, and then came. And I remember saying, I can't afford this guy. And he says it to me to this day when he started with me, I wouldn't have hired myself at the time you hired me, John, because you definitely couldn't afford me. But mentally, I needed that to focus on where I was strong. And then I needed somebody like Fiachra to put rigor and structure in the business, because it had hit that stage of evolution. And it was the best decision for the business, because he's been a rock and a fantastic person to work with over this period of time. So from that, then we've developed and grown, and we have, I guess, developed another division in the whole area of leadership and organization change. And I suppose we've reached a level where steady as you go. Things evolve in different divisions. We have the outplacement division, which is all about restructuring and change. And that can go up and down depending on the economic cycles. But I've always been, when people say you want to start out a business and you want to 10x it, I prefer to have a business which is back to values led and delivers what it says, rather than growing too fast and not being able to deliver on that. And there have been times when we've been really stretched to kind of deliver on all those projects, but making sure you have quality people being able to service your clients and hang on to your reputation is more important than anything else. And that's hugely key for me in how we do business.
Yeah, because there's a natural instinct. You must grow. If you open an office, you open a second one. If you open a second one, you open 2 more, and that multiplied by 10 that you're talking about. And that for me is where the win happy thing comes back to everything. What do you want to do? What makes you happy? What are you enjoying doing? Do you really want this multiplied by 10? So you're dealing with the same thing multiplied by 10, the same problems multiplied by 10. You use the word burnout. So that's exactly where you end up. And why? There's actually no reason for it other than this expectation. No, if you're driven in that way, that's cool. But if you're not driven in that way and you want to, I want to enjoy what I do, you say make a difference for clients that I like dealing with. You don't have to go global on it. If you don't want to be sitting in airports all day and all night, well, just do that in Ireland. Thanks a million.
Yeah, and, we started to do international work now, but it's with a client that we started to work with in Ireland. But one of the things that I think a lot of people get wrong is that maybe ego gets in the way and they have a go. And I remember having an offsite session, and we had a facilitator with us, and he said, here's, what about this number as a North Star for you to go for? And straight away, I could feel in my stomach, my God, that's going to compromise everything I believe in. If I go for that, what type of quality will we be able to deliver? And, you can grow by acquisition, you can build new things. I think the future will belong to companies who are niche and are of a certain size that will not be too big. I really do think that we're now in this era. I think we spent the last 100 years in an industrialized world where it was all about scale and volume. And now with AI and automation taking a lot of that routine work, I think the organizations who are creating unique value propositions and adapting quickly will thrive in the world. But the ones who are just going for scale, they will be found out. And we've all dealt with those type of companies who were great companies one time, then they got too big and either the leader fell apart or they were taken over and they lost their soul. And that's a big challenge, I think, for businesses like ourselves who are in the professional services world.
Yeah, it's funny. we work with a particular kind of wealth management company or whatever. They handle our pensions and stuff like that. And that's all well and good. Lovely, lovely, lovely people. I mean, proper relationships. And with that sector, everyone was trying to sell you something. This gang, we're trying to genuinely look after you when the day comes when you need a pension. So we get notice that they've been bought by someone. And don't worry, Greg will still be in the mix. That's all good. And then they're still dealing with you, making sure, but the same characters start to pull back a little bit, and that's okay. Then you start getting the corporate literature from them with someone's name at the bottom of all of these email newsletters selling their different products and services, and you have no idea who they are. And the next minute then you hear the company has been rebranded. So now suddenly you don't know the person you're dealing with anymore. You can barely remember the name of the bloody company in the first place. And I'm sure the conversation on the other side is, yeah, let's get bigger, let's acquire, let's do this, let's do that. But the essence of who they were in the first place and the reason I was dealing with them is virtually gone completely at this stage. And I think in this kind of personal services type business, it is about people. When you have a problem, I want to know that I can call John and that it doesn't disappear.
And I suppose the program I was doing today before we came on, I talk about your personal story and helping people to shape their essence. And I talked about growing up at a crossroads and really reconnecting with who you are as a person, your life experiences on your journey, and then the effect, the difference you want to leave in the world. And I just think an awful lot of people are so busy at work that they don't spend the time to reconnect to who they are and the difference they want to. Because I believe everybody wants to make a difference in the world. And I've seen people in organizations who've gone in there and they might have gone into a permanent pensionable job and plateaued, and they've become a certain type of person as a result of the environment. And the environment has shaped who they are today, and they've kind of played it safe, or they've said, I can't make the change. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people that I'm meeting, especially in their 50s and even in their 60s. They're wanting to do something that gives them that sense of meaning and purpose. And they've signed up for maybe a career in their 20s that they believe defines them. But I wrote in my book, the first half is from 20 to 45 of your career, and 45 to 70 is the second half. And I believe that an awful lot of people, in the first half, life kind of plays out for them for the most part, unless they face a redundancy or something. But then 45 to 70 requires a lot more interior design and exterior design. It requires you to really get to know what is it that you want now, and how can you make that happen for yourself? And a lot of people feel that that's outside their control. And I just think that once you sit down with people and start to work with them and they begin to realize, what have I to offer? Yes, but what am I letting go? You're letting go a life of sterile, plateaued life where you're not happy at home, you're not happy in your work, and it's showing up like that girl who came into me in my office and said, where's the real John gone? There's an awful lot of those moments that you meet people and you say, you're at a crossroads now. Do you want to stay on this journey of sterility, or do you want to actually energize and get to see a bit more of life?
What a beautiful observation from that woman who made that comment to you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It's like this thing, when someone holds a mirror up to you and you kind of feel like you're found out, and you're kind of, Jesus. I know there's imposter syndrome, which is something different, but it feels like you're an imposter in a suit and you're there going to work and you're not being yourself. And she was brilliant to spot it, and a much younger person than I was, and brave enough to say it, because a lot of people probably thought it but didn't say it.
And what a horrible feeling to be that person just punching in time. A good friend of mine. He's become a good friend of mine. He's actually the son of one of my best buddies. He's in a challenging little role somewhere. Gets up really early. I think he enjoys it. And the option of working in one of the big multinational pharmaceutical things, you go and shift work and you get a shift allowance and you punch it in and you punch it out. And it's like, yeah, will I take this easy number? And everyone is saying, oh, that'll be great for you and all that kind of thing, good money. And I'm pleading with him. Pleading with him, John. Do not take this. It will absolutely kill you. You have so much to offer. Don't be another number just punching in time there, because that's exactly what you're going to do. But then again, we need all of those people in all of those big companies doing all of those jobs. And even if it is production line punching it in stuff, it can't be brilliant and wonderful for everyone.
And what are his fears? What are his drivers? And I meet so many people. The phone rings a lot for us around January time and around August, September time.
Yeah, same with us.
When people, no, for individuals, when people have had time off on holiday, either at Christmas or in summer, and they decide, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to change. And what they actually want then is like instant coffee, instant career advice. They want to have a cup of coffee with you for a half an hour, and you're instantly, like Mystic Meg, going to sort out their career. And what I say to people is, a cup of coffee and a chat is not going to sort out your problems. And they need to invest in themselves, a lot more time with somebody to work through that process. But people will, that same person will not invest X amount in getting themselves the right career advice to sort out their lives for the next 20 years. But they will then leave you for the cup of coffee and maybe do a bit of retail therapy and buy themselves something to make themselves feel better. It's bad. But that's what you're dealing with quite often,
Yeah, you cheer yourself up for half an hour. How has work changed?
I think that human beings have become a lot more important in the work environment now. As I said, in the industrialized world, we had a job spec, and we delivered, and it was all about productivity and pace. Today, it's changed in that we talked about professional services earlier on. I think everybody now is providing a professional service. And that's how work is changing, is that we've got to upgrade ourselves as humans to not just look at the skills of what I used to do as an engineer or an accountant or whatever, but what's the human element that I'm bringing there? Am I collaborating with people? Am I communicating with them? How am I making them feel? If I'm managing people, am I delivering empathy? So I think it's that greater focus on the human being side of things, and then becoming digitally savvy as well and becoming smart in how you use productivity tools. I think that's how work has changed for the individual. I think for organizations then it's changed in that they're not the kings anymore and talent is in scarce supply. We had a conversation here with our recruitment team yesterday where people are leaving certain organizations to go to another new organization in a region. And everybody is frightened because they're losing great talent, but it's not instantly replaceable. And I think that's the challenge, is that companies will spend money on recruiters to find the right person, but they're not spending money on people and their career development. And that's where I think people really want the help today. And they're afraid if they develop their careers, they'll go elsewhere. But why not, if you develop your careers and really care for them, they might actually stay. And I think that's a big shift that lots of organizations seem to know that that's what the problem is, but almost afraid to invest in that in case, Greg heads off to sunnier shores.
Like for me, a big shift was that if you turn the clock back, we're working away in a particular place. The job evolves, there's a bit of learning, there's a bit of development, the challenge keeps changing. And after a period of time when you're just repeating yourself a little bit, you think, do you know what now? Maybe I need to look at the newspapers on a Friday, the recruitment section, and you sconce them, you see a job opportunity, and maybe that's the beginning of it. But no, you're in a job a wet week, everything's going fine, you're doing that little bit of learning, and before you scratch, you get the little nudge on LinkedIn from a recruiter. And of course, they're desperately trying to fill some of these roles, and they're going to throw bouquets at you and all that kind of good stuff. And when you've had a half bad day in the office, when wrestling with a bit of learning and someone maybe gave you a bit of constructive criticism, you decide, I'll take that interview. And you're in the job now 13 months. And I always think in any role, there's a learning period. And then once you learn it, then that's your chance to fly. I've got the bit of experience, my own talent, and I'm going to fly now, bank that learning. And a good window where you can really progress there and develop yourself. But when you throw the towel in at 13 months, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing your career a huge disservice. And it's a disservice to the organization you're leaving and probably the organization you've decided to join, because that only repeats itself and repeats itself. It's the LinkedIn honey is a little bit too easy, and you need to be robust enough, I think, and independent thinking to avoid that honey trap.
But you need to know, firstly, what you want, and the career conversation that they should be having with their manager in the organization, people are having with those external recruiters. So I see it when grads join an organization and they get loads of care and attention at the start.
Yeah.
And then they're let off into the world. So all of the investment comes either in the recruitment of the candidate or the onboarding. But after that, it's kind of fend for yourself. But that's where the opportunity is missed by organizations, is that they don't tend to care for their flock after that. And what we've got to realize is that it's not like the old days, and people need more care and attention and need more empathy and need more support. And maybe they are not as resilient as we might have been in our generation, but they're also very smart, and they will be attracted then by the instant hit of, I might be trying to get on the mortgage thing and I can get an extra 10 grand here. So there are financial challenges when people are younger in their career. I think when people, we have research to show that 80% of people flatline in performance after 12 months, which speaks to the point that you make there. They kind of get to this level and say, what next? And I think what organizations are slow to do is sit down, have the conversation and say, okay, Greg, you've grown in your role in the last 12 months. How can you now enrich and grow in your role in the next 12 months, and really lay out a plan of development where they're going to get an opportunity to grow skills that are going to be valuable in their career? And thirdly, I think what they need to do is sign up to a new contract to say, you know what, if Greg stays here for 3 years, that's great. Or if he stays here for 5 years, that's magnificent. But you're not going to be staying there for life. And I think this new short-term contract is really what it's about. Give the person as much development while they're there, and they give you as much value back. And then it's maybe best for everyone to move on.
Yeah, and I guess the catch-22 with that investment in development is if you're doing that and you're doing that on a cycle and they're zipping out the door after 14 months, suddenly you're kind of thinking, this is a big waste of time, I'm investing loads on individuals and getting that right, I guess.
Both sides, Greg.
Yeah, of course, yeah, it is. Yeah.
And we're often too busy then as managers or leaders of our business to have those conversations, and we realize, geez, I should have invested more time, or maybe they were immature and they were attracted to the shiny new thing next door,
Yeah, and maybe that career development conversation needs to happen in a big way with everyone coming through the door and reinforced at every, 2-monthly review or every conversation. So that person, for the first time in their lives, does realize there's someone interested in progressing me. Your perspective on remote working, when we talk about change, do you consider that to be a big change, or is that something that, you're talking about day in, day out in Harmonics?
There's the combination then of people on teams. Some are remote, some are hybrid, and some are in the office all of the time. I think, different people have different, some people are more introverted, some are more extroverted. Again, that's stepping back and saying what's right for me at my stage in my life. What am I winning? What am I losing by working remotely? And what we're losing is definitely that sense of connection, being with people and learning from people. And then in some cases, we're working remotely in global operations who have very little face-to-face time. So that's the way of the world that we work in. I do think that the influence for your career has got to be a little bit different now from a remote perspective, because you're not getting that ad hoc time when you meet with your manager in the office. And you've got to be a lot more intentional in how you influence and communicate to people what you're doing and how you're doing it. Because if you're at home all of the time and I'm your manager, I don't really know how you're doing your work. All I can see is the output. So it's really important for individuals to become a lot more intentional in how they influence their career. So that's the big piece, that it could be great that you're at home, you can pick up the kids and you can be remote, but just the fear of stagnating in your career is important, and making sure that you're developing and growing, and that you're not sitting back remotely while somebody is in the office making those connections and building a relationship with key influencers in the organization while you're at home.
Yeah, and not having that opportunity of your lady who said to you, "Where's John?" after disappearing to.
Yeah.
That knowledge of you and that experience of you and knowing your ebbs and flows by just interacting with you on a regular basis. I've noticed a few clever initiatives by Harmonics around the application of what you do, the Future Readiness Index being one of them, and your annual Global Future of Work report. Was that you deliberately trying to put mechanisms in place to track this stuff on a regular basis?
Yeah, what we were trying to do was track the skills that were in demand in the future of work, and we've collated those into our Energizer program, where we've 9 C's and 3 D's. 9 C's are the people skills and the 3 D's are the digital skills. So it was all about keeping a scan on that. And the Future Readiness Index was a free instrument for anybody to complete, to just I suppose, assess themselves under 5 different criteria on how prepared they were for the future of work, and holding a mirror up to themselves. So all of it, was, and this Energizer program is all about that whole concept of empowering the individual to be, as I say, more intentional in how they plan their career for the future. Because, as I mentioned on the program, 70% of people globally, from a book called The Chaos Theory of Careers and the research that they did there, their careers, they end up in their career by chance. So we end up through, like I did in many cases, having different conversations and led me down different roads, some good, some not so good, but it was as a result of chance. And that's fine. But back to remote work, if we're a little bit more intentional in how we want to develop certain skills, we can begin to guide that chance in a way that will work out well for us.
Are you getting requests from clients to do specific work in that area, just to crack the code, the remote working code?
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of requests to help organizations to communicate with their people around hybrid work, and what the diktat was going to be 3 days and 2 days and all of that. But what many companies missed was the opportunity to have a great conversation with their people, rather than coming down on a diktat of this is the way things are going to be. Our view would be that it's gone from parent-child relationship to adult-adult conversation. And by facilitating those conversations, people feel listened to and feel that their voices were taken on board as part of the transition to remote and hybrid. So that's how we've been involved in that conversation.
And the dad, the writer, with his journal entries every day, to John, the writer, and the speaker, and the podcaster. How in the name of God did all of that come about?
I remember when I did the television series, I was offered the week of doing the first night, I was contacted by an agent to write a book by Christmas, and it had come out in kind of May, and I was offered an incredible offer of money to have it done by a certain period of time, and it blew my mind. And that agent put me under a lot of pressure to do it. And at the time, I had spent 50 days filming the program the year before, and my own business was under pressure. So I was trying to do two things at the one time, and I wasn't happy with the quality or the product of the book that I was producing. And I didn't take the money, obviously, because I didn't deliver the book at that time. And that was in 2010. And then, obviously, I told my daughter at the time, I'm writing a book, and she was young. I think she was 8 at that stage. And every year, every Christmas, she would say, "Did you write the book, Daddy?" And that'd just be, however successful a business year we had, that would just give me a little dagger into the guts and say, oh. So
the brown envelope moment.
so she was holding the mirror up to me, and eventually, how I ended up writing the book was I was always coaching too many people, and I was always too busy, and the usual type of thing. So I put something into the book called Competing Commitments, and it's this whole idea of what you want to achieve in life. There's something competing against that's stopping you doing it. And it was a lack of belief, and also a sense that what I would write wouldn't be of any value, which I'm sure a lot of authors struggle with. And I got some coaching on that, and the coaching was that, and this was at the start of 2018, that I would let go of all of the people that I was coaching. And I was personally coaching 15 people at that time and running a business. And it was just overwhelming. I ended all of my coaching assignments by the end of 18. And then I set out on a Monday to work from home, back to remote working, and to just focus on writing the book. And I'm not an alcoholic, but I gave up drink for 6 months. And I wanted to be 100% focused on making sure that I was clear on what I wanted to do. And by the end of June, I had the book finished. And then I went with a publisher. And sometime in December 2019, we got a delivery of books here. And it was funny, the books came in, and they were in a box here in my office where I'm speaking now. And I opened the box and I was, oh, geez, it's like I was coming out into the world and I was going to be sharing my inner thoughts or whatever. And I was kind of embarrassed then. And then obviously the book went out and it did very well, and I'm very proud of it. So it's just the inner struggle, I think, and journey, that when you decide to do something, you might have a goal, and it might be that you're going to achieve something within a period of time. But it took me the bones of 8-9 years to achieve something that I wanted to achieve. And I actually put into the book, it's here beside me, but I put into the book that I wanted to do it while both my parents were alive. And my dad died in 19 and my mum died in 21. So I was able to hand them a copy of my book in the kitchen. And all my father said to me was, "You must have fair balls to do a book." And he had that in him too, and he had lots of scripts that he would have written for plays and stuff like that. But obviously he didn't have the education, left school young, and so on and so forth. But had a huge talent for it. But I'm delighted that I did it, and it's there, and I got that. I scratched that itch.
What's your dad's name?
Sean.
Sean. And your mum?
Chris.
Chris, cool. 17 years in harmonics and keeping yourself buzzed up and challenged, and not that you're just repeating the cycle. What do you do yourself to keep prodding John along and doing new things?
Yeah, so I actually moved into home back to where I grew up because my parents passed away, and moved back into the house, and I've discovered a love of gardening and planted flowers and doing up the place, and it feels like it's a rebirthing of where I grew up in Kyle, and I'm loving that, and doing painting and in the evening and just bringing a new energy to the place. I do circuit classes twice a week. I love that. I used to do a lot of cycling, but I just love the hits I get from that, from a a dopamine hit. And I am a big fan of Limerick hurling. And we've at last had the greatest 5 years of our life in relation to success. So there's lots to be keeping me going. And, I enjoy the interactions with people, and I think I'm innately curious about life and learning new stuff and meeting new people.
Back to the book, John, for a second. Who is it for? Who should pick up this book, and where can they get it?
It's on Amazon. Future Proof Your Career. From the Inside Out is the strap line, and that's going back to, future proofing your career from your values, from your heart. And who should pick it up is anybody who has plateaued or is thinking about their next steps and wants to take a step back and reflect as I walk them through the journey of how you should future-proof your career today in a journey that's going to take 50 to 60 years. And as I say, there are 6 career stages. Onboarding and growth are 2 of them, but they only happen for a period of time. But then there's contented, there's hitting a ceiling, there's being frustrated, and there's being in a toxic environment. I've been in all 6 in my life, and most people have. And what we need to learn is that when you're in growth doesn't last forever. Like you've said, the winning streak that you might be on from a sales perspective. So we've got to realize that these are things that we have a circle of control, stuff that we can control and what we can't control. And I give people very helpful tools and advice as well from people that I've coached who have gone through situations. And I tell those stories about people who've hit a ceiling, been frustrated, and received an unexpected notice that your time is up, Greg, and move on. And I have no plan, and I have, a mortgage and 3 kids and a certain standard of living, and I don't know where to go next. So it's all about, as I say, being a little bit more prepared. And the greatest challenge most people have is that they can read the book or they can have the cup of coffee with somebody. It's the action that you take after that, because action cures fear. And if we take those actions, we'll be a lot more, I guess, intentional once we're working with somebody. And it's one thing to read a book, and there's lots of different books out there. I don't claim to be any guru. I'm just somebody who sits down with people who are at a career crossroads and helps them to make better decisions for themselves that are guided by what's driving them on the inside, but also knowing that they have to bridge a gap, which might be that they might need to have a conversation with somebody, be more influential rather than being quieter, talk themselves up a little bit more, go on LinkedIn and put your profile out there. That is all stuff that we can do today. But I meet an awful lot of people who, say, I'd love a career change, but they know what they don't want, but they can't say what they want. And then they want you to do up their CV, and their CV is just 2 pages of your career history. It has nothing in it about what you want in your future. And what I say to people is that you need to design your ideal future role. And that's, again, what you get from the book is designing that ideal future role so that when you meet somebody, you're very clear on what you want to do next and why. And really what I've done with the book, Future Proof Your Career, what I'm doing now with Energizer, and I'm putting the book into a whole video journey of people who are going on that, where am I now to what I want to do next.
John, that is brilliant. And I swear to God, at 17 years of age, I spoke to a career guidance teacher in school. I can pretty much tell you it was the only career conversation anyone had with me between now and then. And I was told at that time to look up the golden pages for the accountants in Cork City. That was the career guidance. So there you go. The greatest teacher along the way, from your point of view, in your career?
There's been many different teachers. My mum taught me 3 great things: faith, hope, and charity. She had a powerful faith in the Catholic Church, and we'd have different conversations about that. But she was very certain where she was going in life. She had great hope, and she gave me great hope that if you have conversations with people and treat them well, you'll always do well. And charity, she gave so much to others of her time and of her anything that she could to others. So they were. She was a powerful teacher, as was my dad in different ways. But I think I would have got a lot of my personality maybe from my mother along the way. And as I say, there's been many different teachers at different times, good times and bad times. I think you learn from every interaction you have with people. And it's about being curious and reflecting on the conversations that you have. Because sometimes you might be getting a message and you're not listening. It's not the right time to hear it. Going back to that conversation I had in the office, where's the real John gone? There's lots of different times that I've made the same mistake time and time again in certain situations. I said, geez, how did I end up here again? I think life is a great teacher, but you've got to put yourself out there and take some risks to learn the real challenging lessons. Because if you kind of sit back and hide and allow others to make the decision, then you're never going to amount to anything. And I was interviewing someone on a podcast recently, and I think one of the things they said was, people are so busy today. And she said, I'm paid for my perspective. If I'm always busy, I have no perspective. I thought that was a powerful phrase, for us to think about, that we're always so busy and distracted with technology now that we're never taking that step back to, like the older people did, sit by the fire, look into the fire, be comfortable that nothing else is happening. And I found that since I've gone back home as well, and just sitting out in the evening and seeing the flowers go, or the butterflies during a Sunday afternoon on the flowers, when our mind wanders, that's when we get the opportunity to learn lots about ourselves. But when we're distracted by different people who are shouting at us on social media and trying to invade our headspace, that's when we're not being ourselves. And I think that's what a lot of maybe our challenges in the future will be about, is getting our time to be ourselves.
And the podcast, John, is called The Chord.
The chord, getting in tune with work, it's very much linked to harmonics. Harmonics came from the whole concept of being in tune with your career and the art of career crafting. And the chord is just having conversations with people in work about how it's changing and what we need to do as a result.
What can people expect if they tune in or subscribe? Could you give me just a small flavour of some of the guests?
Yeah, we've had the likes of Mauro Porcini, who's the Chief Innovation Officer globally with PepsiCo. He's an Italian, and he's a fantastic passion for work, and the love of what he does comes across so powerfully. We've had Mary Collins talking about the multi-generational workforce. And we've had many different guests who talk about leadership. Kerry Fleming talks about, surviving to thriving, working in Hull Tashridge in the UK as a professor. So there are many different people that we interview from many different backgrounds. Joan Hodgins from Diageo talks about talent today and what they can expect. So these are all different people that I meet and have chats with, and I asked them a question at the start, which has got a huge amount of, I suppose, interest around what are the values that shaped who you are today. And the answer that I get from them, we're kind of putting them all together. And it's powerful, the stories we get from them, like you've got from me, around childhood and the influences in the environment. And you see this person who is up here in life as a professor or a professional, but when you bring it back to basics, what were the values that shaped who you are today? And once they answer that conversation, I had Sean Gallagher on from Australia, who's an academic there, and he was in 11 cities in 8 years growing up as a child because his dad was a swimming coach and he was thrown into the water every morning at 5 o'clock. What an induction into being resilient in the world. But that was what his dad did to help him in life. So again, as I say, it's not just about the professional stuff about the future of work. I'm always interested in who that person is and where they come from.
And the question I always ask everyone, John, is what's happiness to you?
I remember one person asking me that in the UK years ago, and another person in the room answered it in a much better way. And I've kind of robbed it a little bit, do some good, make some money, have some fun. And, it's a simple way of kind of describing what happiness is. And ultimately, we can't be in a state of happiness all of the time. But as long as we know that for the majority of the time we're striving to be happy, then all we can... And happiness is ultimately not being wrapped up in yourself. It's what you do for others and the impact that can have on you. And I saw that with my mother, and I saw that with my father, and I saw that in the environment that I grew up. I think that stayed with me for life.
Your best day ever, John?
My best day ever was the day my daughter was born.
What's her name?
Sarah.
Lovely. Phil Lynott wrote a song about her just to celebrate that.
Yeah.
When it comes to winning happy and that feeling of elation when the ball hits the back of the net, or when Limerick win again, what are your win happy moments?
Yeah, I remember one of the big contracts we won was actually with Musgrave in Cork, one of the early days. And I was in the Burlington Hotel as it was then in Dublin. And I was sitting down on my laptop and my phone rang, and it was somebody from there, and they were ringing me, and we'd gone in for a pitch. And it was the first time we'd ever won a contract over a huge amount of money. And they said, could we reduce it by 3 or 4 grand or something like that? And it was the value of it was 100 grand. And I said yes immediately because I never thought we were going to win this. And
yes, please.
Yes, please. And the buzz I got, and I remember ringing Liam, who works with me, and Mary T at the time, and Liam was driving down the N7 and he started beeping his horn, and he was so excited, and I was jumping outside the hotel. And that buzz in the earlier days, I think, of winning those kind of projects and feeling almost like that challenger brand that was taking on bigger opposition and being the small guys and making a dent. And I remember, again, running out the office here and opening the door, and the recruiters could have been on calls with people. And I was roaring and shouting and saying, we did it. And my mother, would, if I did tell her I was going for a contract, sure, she'd be ringing me every night and wondering, I've said prayers last night now, and will I come in? And I'd be saying, why did I tell her? She'd have all of the prayers said, but they were the innocent wins at the start, and they give you the kick. And I think if we have any sense of wanting to do our own thing and make a difference, then the enjoyment is huge when you kind of do it your own way rather than you have to fit into a system. And I think freedom is something that I always probably wanted, that autonomy and freedom and purpose that Dan Pink talks about, that sense of being able to do it without having to be restricted by doing it in a certain way kind of came across. And this was winning, doing it in a way that we could shape how we were going to deliver the solution rather than feeling corporate had told us to do it this way, and that's the way we had to do it.
Yeah, well, I think we need to give a big shout out to those people who gave us hope and had faith in us, like Chris, your dad, Sean, who gave you a bit of tough medicine at one point in time, that lovely woman in the office who wanted to know where the real John had disappeared to, and that man with the brown envelope.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. John, thanks a million for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, good man yourself. Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.